Hey guys, so warning, in the first part of the video there's gonna be quite a bit of flashing in case you want to avoid flashes, but in this video I'm gonna talk about two builds that I did. None of them kind of deserve their own videos, I would say, because the first build that I'm gonna be talking is the new Herald of Hives, and this is probably my favorite and the biggest auto blaster, the most satisfying explosions. And the second build that I'm gonna be talking is Kinetic Fusillade, sort of like a machine gun, because it's very fast attack speed and it's only two buttons. You hold the button to attack and then the other button is to teleport. Both of those builds had their own problems and they're not very serious builds essentially. So let's start with this build that I just kind of finished. The new Herald of Hive is coming from Lost Unity Ring. It provides level 30 Herald of Hives. Now this Herald of Hives is kind of, I don't want to make this too long video, but essentially the Herald of Hives is very high base damage and it does all the damage types: chaos, physical, fire, cold and lightning damage. So to scale its damage is also a bit tricky, and I chose to scale its damage by getting minute damage and then picking spiritual aid so that minute damage affects me, and scaling all the damage essentially. Now another part of the Herald of Hives is that it is giving a buff that grants 3% more damage per held affecting you. In game it says 3%. On PoE DB it says 4% for some reason, but in game it says 3%. That buff can be increased by the held buff effect, and you essentially want to be Elementalist because Elementalist has a reservation for heralds. You want to run all the heralds just to increase that 3% multiplied by the amount of heralds that you have, and then increase that by the increased herald buff effect. So essentially in the end I'm getting 62% more damage for everything. However, the bad part is that you cannot link this herald to anything because it's inside the ring, and most other heralds provide absolutely nothing other than just that 3% more per herald. Because, for example, Herald of Ice adds flat damage to spells or attacks, but heralds are not neither of those. So Herald of Ice is just completely useless. Herald of Ash only scales pretty much just with the physical part of the Herald of Hives, and it's only 1/5 of all the damage. Herald of Purity as well only scales the physical. Herald of Agony does absolutely nothing. The poison is useless in this case. So the idea for this build was my old build. I don't remember which league. That was before counterattack skills got reworked, and back when we had Vengeance counterattack. And I did that trick with the Herald of Thunder, and it was so cool. One of my favorite builds. You essentially use Storm Secret Ring so that each time Herald of Thunder hits an enemy, it does damage to you. And when it did damage to me, it also procced or had a chance to proc Vengeance. And Vengeance was an attack, and it's like a full circle around you, so it's like big AoE. And I sort of wanted to redo that, but now with the Herald of Hives. The Herald of Hives, by the way, increases it's a pulsing AoE. It does pulses, but to increase those pulse frequency, you need to apply ailments on enemies. So it can be poison, it can be ignite, and what I chose to use was Herald of Thunder with Elementalist. All damage can ignite and always ignite. So Herald of Thunder essentially ignites, and each time it hits the enemy it applies a new ignite. I assume always applies new ignite, as long as it is a bit stronger ignite, I assume. But it ramps up to 50 stacks for Herald of Hives. That's the maximum frequency. Blasting part of this build is amazing. I would say top tier. By the way, the explosions are coming from Cane of Kulamak Chaos explosions, and I chose to use Cane of Kulamak for, well, multiple reasons, because what weapon do I even use? If I choose elemental weapon, it won't affect Chaos and physical part of the Herald of Hives. But if I use minute damage, it affects all of the damage types. And plus levels don't matter because you cannot raise levels of unique skills, so you don't have many choices. And we do not have base critical strike chance, so scaling crit is also very, very difficult. Not impossible, but I chose to go non-crit. So I'm using Cane of Kulamak because it can roll minute damage, it can roll double damage, chance to deal double damage, and explode. And explode is what makes this build clear really, really well. Because when these explosions happens, they also ignite enemies, and all the ignited enemies kind of ramp up the Herald of Hives frequency. So then Herald of Hives pulses faster and does more damage, more DPS. While clear speed is amazing with this, but single target is absolutely terrible. I don't even know what else I could do to increase the single target damage. I have quite a lot of increased minion damage, so I have enough increased damage. I also have more multiplier from the Herald of Hives itself, like 62% more. I do have shock, I do have exposure, but I'm not sure if exposure is actually working. Is it even working? Against uniques, I don't see the exposure icons next to a boss, like this one, heraldry. Since I do have all the heralds, nearby enemies have cold, fire, and lighting exposure. And because I'm elementalist, that's by the way 10% exposure, and elementalist adds an extra 25. So minus 35% elemental resistances should be applied to enemies, and then elemental weakness, and that should be enough. I don't have crit, so I'm losing one way of scaling the multiplier, of scaling the damage. I also do have golems and the golem buff effect, and I even have lethal pride for. I actually have, I believe, 60% chance to deal double damage. Aspect of the avian level 30 version, which gives 12% chance to deal double damage, but it is a rotational buff. It rotates between giving speed and giving double damage, chance to deal double damage. So I should still have about 60% chance to deal double damage, but it just doesn't feel like it's doing good single target damage. It can, but it's also kind of squishy. It cannot really tank very well, because usually Auto Blaster's builds just focus on movement speed, and I did try to invest into movement speed in multiple different ways. I will have Pathable link import code if you wanna check it, or maybe Maxroll GG. I'm not sure which link is better. But for movement speed, I got movement speed amulet with penetration and reservation, because I needed that extra reservation for aspect of the avian. I'm using Valborn Magnate, which increases flask effect, which allows me to gain more speed from flask, because movement speed is the most important part for this. And then what else do I have? I have for bandit rewards, I helped Kratin to get 8% movement speed. I'm using phase run with automation, but phase run is like not consistent, and I cannot have very high level because I lack dexterity. My movement speed boots are 35 movement speed boots with 5% implicit, so 40% movement speed boots plus phase run, plus I have Quicksilver and Onslaught Flask. So I'm getting quite a big movement speed boost, and when I pick up Speed Shrine, I become too fast. I just cannot handle it. It's too fast. But without the Speed Shrine, it's just barely enough movement speed for this kind of playstyle. The build is only success at clearing, and that's it. Even some bosses I have to swap character, because it just, some bosses are either too dangerous or take too long, or I just don't do enough damage. I don't know what else I could do to increase this damage other than completely reworking the build. Yeah, that's about it for this build. Now I'm gonna switch to my Kinetic Fusillade, which I did earlier, and that one was very fun to play. It had better single target, but it was also kind of squishy, on the squishy side. And this build, the cool part is it only has two buttons. You hold the button for Kinetic Fusillade, it auto shoots as long as you have mana, and you will gain mana on hit. And Lightning Warp, because this build focuses on very high reduced duration. Essentially, the Kinetic Fusillade, you want so much reduced duration that by the time you attack a second time, those delayed projectiles duration is so short that they are released before the next attack. That way you don't need to kind of tap the button, you just hold the button. It does have enough mana on hit and a bit of mana leech, and it can like easily sustain life and mana, but it is also kind of squishy build. It does have quite a bit of evasion and suppression and life on hit, and that's pretty much it. I'm using Fed Ring, so I cannot use Utility Flask, which is great because now people won't be able to complain that I'm not using the most efficient utility flask, because I literally cannot use them. You don't care about movement speed on boots. Your moving speed is limited by your cast speed for Lightning Warp. Why did I stop leveling this? I forgot. Oh, I wanted to keep Lightning Warp level lower, because it doesn't even have delay. The delay is the cast speed, which is also very quick because I'm stacking uniques that have quite a bit of cast speed. I'm also getting Onslaught, and this is Tailwind, so I'm getting quite a bit of action speed. It's actually quite simple how to calculate. There's no need to calculate anything. You look at PUB. If your skill duration is shorter than your attack time, then it's good. So if you look at Kinetic Fusillade, here we go. Skill duration 0.066 seconds, which means you can do 15 attacks per second before you run into issues of not having enough reduced duration. That's it. If you have less than 15 attacks per second, you're good. and I have a bit less than 12. And that's true, because once I pick up the speed shrine, it starts breaking and not shooting projectiles all the time. Now, you can actually get to 30 attacks per second with this, but then you need a perfectly rolled 20% reduced duration warp timepiece and time clasp. Now, in my case, all you need is 18%, 18%, and 19%, like those numbers. You can have 20% on one of them and then 17 on other and 18, but you need that amount of reduced. And then the rest is everything on the passive tree that has reduced duration and less duration. So including this and then anointing this. And that is all you need. Now, these can be very expensive if you're going for perfect 20% reduced, but if you just drop to 18%, it's much cheaper. So if I were to search 1 divine, of course it's not super cheap, but it's still 1 divine, and if you're going for minus 20, I believe it was 4 divines, 6 divines now. So you do not need minus 20 duration, even minus 18 is enough. Or you can even go for minus 17 if you can get warp timepiece. So if you're going 19, that's 70 chaos. If you're going 20, oops, do not need that. If you're going 20, it may even be cheaper to go for 20% duration on warp timepiece and then get 17% and 18%. The other ring is just onslaught on hit for more speed. There's another way you can do this with the Soul Eater ring, but here's the thing with this build other than being squishy. It has so much reduced duration that all the buffs that you would think adding would become useless. Like Blood Rage, useless, less than a second. Those Bloodline Tigers, useless, they last like 1 second, maybe even less. I tried them, useless. Normal courses, useless. But here's the good thing, normal courses are pretty much useless, but that's a good thing because you can use the Soul Eater ring. And I did try it, this ring, and it was working, but it does have its own problems. First of all, mana issues, and you're still not gonna reach 30 attacks per second with this because Soul Eater is capped to 45 stacks, which is like what, 225% speed. You kind of also need Spell Slinger to apply Chorus, and you want level 1 Temporal Chain because it has shortest duration, and you want to also link with, I believe, reduced duration also, although in Spellslinger you do not need it all the time. It wasn't very consistent this way. You would need to like min-max it better or find a better solution, but you do not need any other expensive gear, just this one and Spellslinger. But the mana would be a much bigger problem because you would need to reservate a bit more, and you would still not reach 30 attacks per second. And like I said, with 30 attacks per second you need to absolutely get perfect reduced duration rings and amulet, which is overall combined like 10 divines, just those. And in the end the benefits are not even that great, so I went with the just synthesized ring instead. The weapon actually is very hard to beat with Katora's Vine because I'm using 2 heralds, and this is Scion, Deadeye for extra projectile, and Assassin. The gain frenzy charge is just complete nonsense, but mainly for extra projectile, because you want as many plus projectiles as possible. That way in one cast you create more than one projectile, multiple projectiles. And I am getting a bit of a herald buff effect, just these points. You don't have to go with heralds, but you can go with like Wrath and it would be enough. You would not need to take these, but these provide a bit more, and Herald of Hives does allow you to freeze enemies. And I am using the invert resistance thing, and I'm also taking the elemental mastery for another 15%. So combined I have 38% chance to invert enemy resistances. That way I don't need to worry about lowering the resistance. I don't need to worry about because I cannot really use normal courses like LA weakness, and I don't need exposure. And exposure, for example, how would you apply exposure? The Hydrosphere wouldn't last at all because everything with duration will be pretty much reduced to like 95% less duration. That's how I'm getting my damage basically. Herald of Ice, Herald of Thunder with buff effect, and just lots of attack speed, and Blizzard Crown for flat damage. I basically try to maximize the attack speed over efficiency, over like damage. I am also using Wisps, I'm using added cold damage, I am using Trinity as well. That way I'm also getting penetration in addition to inverting enemy resistances. And yeah, it works really well. Single target was about, this is shooting 8 projectiles, so 800k times 8 projectiles, that's 6.4 million single target DPS. and that's very consistent DPS. You literally just have 2 buttons. You cannot fail with 2 buttons. Oh, wait, another like really important part, and I did add it into POB custom nodes. The jolt from Graph can give you a lot of, well, not a lot of, but yes, a lot of increased damage, or should I say more damage. Also crit chance, crit multiplier, but you're also taking increased damage. So it's like a double-edged sword. The other one is the other one is just increased maximum life. That's pretty much it. So yeah, I will include path of building import code for both builds, and probably max roll GG link as well if you prefer that. I will most likely do one more build, and then I want to take like 1 or 2 weeks before PoE2 to do some Blender stuff, but I still haven't figured out the next build. I'm kind of struggling. If you got some build ideas, let me know in the comments below, and for now, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.